if the opportunity came, I'm like, yeah, I'm taking a chunk out of it. I want a piece of that blade.
This is the last chance I'm going to get at designing a Hypershock for a toy, so it had to be perfect.
They knew that they couldn't really go weapon to weapon, so they went weapon to side of weapon.
We hit the jackpot in Vegas.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Outside of the Box. And excited to chat robots. And so for today's guest, I have with me Joseph Betz of Botz to talk about what we've got going on here in the Midwest. So excited to chat with a fellow Midwesterner.
Thank you for having me on. Yeah, so as mentioned, I run Betz, and that's kind of split between a couple robot related things. I've been heavily involved in the influx of events in the Midwest since COVID, and I also sell combat robot kits. So they're targeted at absolute beginners, and yeah, the idea is just make it a little bit easier than all the other competitors to get someone's foot in the door and let them experience one of the wonderful events we have. Ideally in the Midwest, but wherever you are.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely want to talk about both aspects, the events and also the kits, because I mean, I think the kits are really great, especially as myself being a beginner. That's probably where I should have started instead of trying to put together a completely custom robot. But
Sure.
I like to make things difficult for myself. So first, let's talk about that part. Because there's definitely a few kits that are out there, and I guess it really all depends on what somebody's looking for. But with what you're doing with the building part of it, you can kind of tell everybody a little bit about that, especially for any newer builders who might be interested.
Yeah. So I'm let's see, I will preface this by saying uh I have money to gain by saying yes, go buy a Betz kit, right? And I'm always going to argue for kits and some of their advantages in a few areas, even though I actually didn't start with kits. I messed around with electronics and just figured it out through a lot of trial and error and some help from people on Discord over a period of like 2 years before I actually went to a competition. So I've been through the struggle of electronics and having no idea how to CAD model or 3D print or do anything. But that also supports, I think, some of my arguments for getting a kit if you want to just you get a little bit of a quick start, because I think you learn the most by being at a competition. That's what I found in all my experience. And especially considering just how friendly and open all the builders are. Um, you know, with the competitions that I host, no, that's not the topic to get on right now, but I always tell spectators like, hey, the pits are open. Like, we don't put barriers up or anything. And chances are 95% of the builders will happily give you way too much information on all the details of their robot.
That is very true. Unless people come up to me at a competition and ask me, what parts do you have in your robot? And I'm like, I don't know. Whatever people tell me are the good things to get, that's what I have in my robot.
Sure. Um, well, and that's even another thing you can start to put together over time. That's the other thing I'd add is talk to multiple people. Because you're gonna hear some common parts like, oh, a lot of people use finger tech power switches, or a lot of people use a battery around 300 milliamp hours for US ant weights or whatever it is, right? Um, so yeah, as far as my specific kits go, it's targeted at um, ideally somebody who has just kind of heard of combat robots and they have enough interest to actually show up to a competition. But maybe they don't have the time or commitment to learn about CAD modeling software and get a 3D printer and learn all these other skills, because combat robots, it's got a lot of like sub skills that are just their own hobbies, all on their own. And so I don't sell any spinning weapons right now. I just sell a wedge kit. And the cool thing about it is, well, I think there's a lot of cool things about it. The main thing, right, is it's modular. So it's right now it's 2 aluminum plates and there's standoffs. So it's built like a drone actually. And you can take the top plate off and every component in the kit just slides on and off of these pegs. And throughout the whole robot, it uses, with maybe 2 exceptions, it uses a 2mm Allen key. So with one tool, you can switch out wheels, you can switch out attachments, just by pulling that top cover off. Do to change the battery. You also do to go from a wedge configuration to forks. You can even take the front attachment and mount it on the back. If you wanted to put another back plate on the front for some reason, you could do that too. If you had the weights, you could do a wedge on the front and back. So it's really handy, because that also makes it super easy to repair. So, a lot of really high-end teams are going to be bringing 2-3 copies of their robots to a competition. I've never done that, competing with my own kit at probably 15 events with it at this point. Always had one bot and a handful of parts. I just swap them in. I've always been well under the 20-minute repair timer. And what's nice about it being modular, the last thing I'll say about it is, well, there's no spinning weapons right now, and it's something you can just practice with on your floor. There's room for like vertical spinner attachments, maybe a horizontal spinner, definitely a lifter of some kind. And there's all these things I sort of have planned down the road. And I've done a few prototypes with the vertical spinners, and they've done all right.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. I mean, I think that the kits are a great starting point. Frankly, I still always like to go back and say now, like, I love the first robot that I built. I love it. I loved the design, everything about it. But for learning purposes, there are times where I wish that I had started with a robot that did not have a spinning weapon, because I think that it forces you to learn so much more about driving, because you have to. You can't just rely on the weapon to do all of the work for you. So yeah, I think that it's a great starting point for anybody.
And what specifically, I guess, went wrong with your first robot? Was it the weapon not working or not getting enough fights out of it?
The problem with my first robot was getting into the bracket and being pitted up against loophole first. That was the problem with my first robot.
Sure. Yeah, that's not great.
Yeah, not the best situation. But I mean, otherwise, like, it's great, and I will always like love that I decided to go with a tribute to my favorite robot of all time, Minotaur, as my first
Yeah.
robot. But for people that are very like base level, don't know anything, like barely know what a motor is, there's definitely a better path to go about it, I think.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean it can be overwhelming to add in so many different, quite literally moving parts into the robot, what you're managing. And as you said, I think drive tends to be the most important aspect, at least. Um, so yeah, that all makes sense. But what I do think is cool about the way that at least most electronic systems work is once you have the basic formula down, it really isn't that much more work to add another motor controller and motor to your receiver or plug in a servo to one of those channels. Um, and it is nice because I think the wall is really high for combat robots, but like once you get over that, adding on the other things, it's not as bad.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think whether you go with a kit or whether you decide to do a custom build and be crazy like me, I think the really great thing about that is that if you are a beginner, you start to learn and understand so much about how the robot works as you put it together. Because prior to that, I was just like, okay, cool. There's something inside the robot that's making the weapon spin or making the wheels turn, but I didn't really understand it. But then getting just parts and putting them together and kind of testing it as you go and being like, okay, I've put this piece together and I've hooked this part up and now the robot's able to do this. It makes it so much easier to understand every component of the robot and how it's working as you see it in the box versus another robot, and being able to like look and say, okay, now I see how this failed. Even
Right.
watching other fights and being able to like understand, okay, now I understand what happened here because I've put together a robot and now I get it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and something unique about the kit that I sell right now is it's always come fully assembled, and and then it's optional to wire in your own electronics. But I'm actually changing that. And it's kind of for two big reasons. Um, One is just I guess forcing everyone who buys the kit to just go through the instructions and build the thing themselves. I think it does teach a lot more about how the pieces go together so that they can troubleshoot it, fix it during a competition. But the other thing that it does is I don't have to spend as much time on the actual assembly of the orders. There isn't as much labor into it as much as just having the parts stocked. So I've actually been putting together a new website. I switched platforms and should be released like tomorrow or the day after. That'll be Wednesday or Thursday. Um, and that should also be timed with the new release of this next kit. We're switching to carbon fiber, better drive system. So there's cool things on the horizon.
Well, that is very awesome. Now I do want to also talk a bit about, events, because
Yeah.
I know there was certainly a time when I first started this podcast and didn't think that there was any combat robotics outside of BattleBots, that I had no idea that there was any kind of combat scene in the Midwest. And obviously now I know that there is, but I still would love to see it continue to grow. Kind
Yeah.
of tell me a little bit about like how you got started in running events and, you know, what that looks like today and any like events that are coming soon.
Yeah. So for me, I was, let's see, I started fighting combat robots in 2019. I did 2 events and then, oh, no, it was 3. And then COVID shut everything down. And I'm in now Beloit, Wisconsin. And at the time I was in Oconomowoc, and the closest event to me was Peoria, Illinois. It's the CIRC bot brawl. And that wasn't really coming back during COVID. And then I was looking around and there just wasn't anything nearby. There's one event, it was the Champ Makerspace in Ohio. And they had this 300-gram competition. It was 7 hours away. And 2 weeks before that competition was supposed to happen, they canceled it due to COVID. And it was brutal. So I built a ton of robots over that time, but had no one to fight. And sometime in 2021, I think it was May, I decided to host my own events out of my driveway. I had a I had a shelf that I found on the side of the road, and I turned it sideways, and then I got a 1/8 inch piece of polycarbonate, put it over the shelf, cut it, strapped it down, and I was like, all right, well, there's a roughly 3.5 by 3.5 foot arena. You know, this can't be that hard. And I let's see, I did the challenge brackets on a laptop, and then I had I knew I wanted to do commentary because I used to race RC cars, and I started doing some commentary for that, and it was a blast. But I knew I wanted that, so I got, again, just things I had lying around. This really garbage microphone plugged into a guitar amp, but it actually sounded okay. So I had the PA system, the arena, the laptop to run challenge and a timer. And we had, I think it was 21 robots sign up. 4 of those were mine, which was really a bad idea in hindsight because I was trying to run 4 robots and my first event and commentate, and judge. But it was still a hit. People helped me when I was floundering and not able to do everything all at once. And we ran a very successful ant weight tournament. And even had some plastic ant weights there. And I think 4 different states were represented. Just all out of this 16-year-old kid's driveway. And what it did is 2 things. It first and foremost got me connected with other robot builders that had been around before COVID. And also some serious robot builders who knew some things about hosting events or wanted to for a while. And then it also sent this message of like, hey, if I can host an event, you probably can too. So in that summer, another event got hosted in Minnesota out of someone's driveway. And I forget exactly when it was, but I know that year the first Michigan mashup was hosted. And I don't think there was anything super significant that summer, at least not that I attended, but we had a Discord community starting to grow, and we were getting connected with all these people where you could kind of pick out, like, just on Discord activity and who was doing well at the events. Like, that person's really serious, that person's really serious. And we all just started talking. And eventually, I think it was maybe Caleb Larson's idea first. It was kind of this mutual thing that we came up with in the Discord of like, hey, we should collaborate with some of these events and, maybe do like a point series with a championship or something, kind of modeling off of what NHRL was doing. So then I set up and led the first meeting, and that's kind of how Merca was born. Which is just this really cool thing to look back on because it came from such humble beginnings, and then we're able to crowdsource a beetle weight arena that I built, and then some other 3-pound arenas started popping up too. And yeah, fast forward a bit. Now it's gotten out of my hands. It grew so big, and there were so many people, and I was wrapped up in so many other things. I recently stepped off the board because everyone else has got it. They're just running with it. They're doing great. I still host my own events, and some of those are a part of Merca, but um, I don't see a super strong reason for it to stop anytime soon. There's sometimes an issue of, because these events are so volunteer heavy, and it's really hard to make them profitable with venue costs. There is kind of a practical limit in like manpower, but right now we still have a lot of that. And Merca just got a ton of funding. So they're being very careful with that and rationing that. All wonderful, very responsible people on that board. But there's potential there. They've got ammo, even if they're not doing things with it yet. And we've just seen this snowball effect of more and more people getting involved as our web presence increases, and just the word of mouth. That's most of what I have to say on it. I know there was one other practical limitation. Oh, the other practical limitation. I do see us hitting a point where there could be almost like a dilution of events, where yes, we have a lot of events going on right now. They're spread out by, a few states, a few hours away. So there is a point where it's too much for a competitor to keep traveling to all these events. So the ones that are closer to them are the ones they start to only attend. And I think right now we're at this tipping point where we actually need more competitors rather than more events. And then once the demand for events is kind of exceeding what the events are doing, then I think more events can be added in. But that's the only other thing I had to say on it. There's a limit that we're finding in some places.
Yeah, it's an interesting problem to have. But these things, I think it takes time. There's certainly a lot of people interested in combat robotics, but like it takes time to build out. I certainly wish that there were more events in Indiana. That's something that I'm actively working on as well, to try and find places, because there's a pretty decent at least high school robotics scene where I live, so trying to see if there's any possibilities of them branching out from the normal first stuff into actual combat. So I think we all have to like look at those opportunities and do what we can to get things going, because us all working together as a community is the only way that we're going to be able to make those things happen.
Yeah. Indiana is a really interesting spot as far as Midwest events go, or rather the lack of it. There are people there who have talked about running events. It just hasn't happened yet. And First robotics teams are interesting. I have some connections to First, and I've reached out a little bit. Now in the like Rockford, Illinois area mostly. And I've gotten a lot of opportunities where I can set up a small booth and demonstrate some stuff at an event, but it's really hard to push people over the edge to commit to showing up to an event, which is just a very unfortunate thing I've found. Botz IQ, they had potential. They were a big thing. Right now, there actually is still something left of Botz IQ in Wisconsin, at least, but it's pretty sad. They run one competition a year, and there's almost no growth in it. It's a lot of teams reusing robots and parts from 10 plus years ago. But I know there's potential in a lot of areas, and I do think there could be something huge, especially with getting high school teams involved in this, in some slightly different way than what's currently being attempted.
Yeah, for sure. Now, do you have any events in the next few months upcoming that, for people that might be interested in going either to watch or to participate?
Yes, I wish I could say, oh yeah, we've got one a month away. No, this weekend I'm running an event. So July 13th, in Beloit, Wisconsin, we will be running open ant weights, plastic ant weights, and beetle weights. So should be a good event. It's Merca ranked. I haven't checked the registration list in a little bit. I think I want to do one more push on Facebook and Discord to see if we can bump up our ant weight numbers. But it's running the same day as a pretty big Illinois event. So just kind of is what it is. But in October, October 12th, I will also be running a Merca qualifier then. So that's maybe a more reasonable date in the future.
Well, yeah, exactly. That gives people a little bit of time to play on. I'll
Yeah.
unfortunately be in Canada that weekend, but
No.
yeah, but I mean, I'm sure that it will be a great event. I mean, it seems like a lot of these, the wait lists, like they fill up, and there's still a lot of people going to them. So like the scene is growing. I think
Yeah.
that it's going to take a little bit more time, but it'll definitely get there and eventually spread out. I know, like there's already kind of the cross promotion thing with backwoods and stuff like that, so it's like I
Yeah.
feel like every state around Indiana has some decent level of combat robotics, and just it's not here yet.
Indiana's a bubble. Ohio has more stuff going on than Indiana.
That is true. That is very true. Gotta get it going here. But
Yeah.
yeah, we're working on it. Well, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, do you have any other exciting stuff planned for this year? Or I mean, I don't know that it might be too early to think about 2025. There's part of me that's like, I don't know. I don't know that it's too early to think about 2025 at this point.
Yeah, well, especially when it comes to events of this scale, you start thinking in months and years. And right now, I can't say I know what 2025 is going to look like. There are a lot of things up in the air just in my personal life of, what am I doing? Because I'm 19 right now. But I like hosting these events, and I don't see those necessarily stopping. It's just a matter of how much, how often. Um, and there's interesting things on the horizon as far as the kit side of Betz goes. I mentioned getting connected with some, they're actually first tech challenge teams, and doing some demos. That led to an opportunity where I was able to take kind of I don't want to call it a product as in something that got mass produced or anything, but I made a robotics kit that essentially takes um it takes all the electronics in a robot, a receiver, a battery, and some motors, and lets it become very plug and play. You plug the motor in, and then if you need to change the direction of that channel, you flip a switch, and that reverses the polarity. And all these parts are meant to be mounted to cardboard. And it solves this issue that I at least had with robotics of, well, there's all these robotics kits that are pre-built, and you sit down and you program it, which is really cool and really useful. But what about focusing on the mechanical side of things, right? And just building and prototyping the stuff. So through that kit and some of these school connections, we were able to run a grant-funded workshop for that. And that went really well. And what was the age range? It was middle schoolers. They had to be like no older than 12. And it was the sweet spot for kind of the level of robotics that this was. And I really enjoy doing that kind of stuff. So I see maybe some potential for Botz going more of an educational route in the future. I also see a lot of potential with the new version of the kit, and also just me taking some things a little more seriously on the kit side. I've stepped back a little bit from how many events I'm doing, and have started to put more time into working on these new parts and plans for the future of Botz. And one of those things included the new website. I'm working with a guy named Jake. He's managing our social media, so the Instagram account. You did some interactions with Jake, and you let me know about this. And it's like, oh yeah, sweet, I can do that podcast. But he has been very, very helpful because he brings one, a different perspective, but also a lot of the people skills that maybe don't coming naturally to me. That isn't quite the right phrasing, but I don't want to interact with people as much as I want to focus on and build the robots. But something I totally missed on the first iteration of our website is, we can actually make this kind of fun to be on. We can add in some humor and just make it a genuinely fun experience. So if anyone watching this has a few minutes, check out the homepage. It's worth a read, even if you're not interested in buying any of our robots. It should be up tomorrow or the day after.
Awesome. And yeah, tell people where they can find that, where they can find information about your events, or anything of that nature.
Yeah, so I didn't have to come up with anything clever for the domain. It is betzbotz.com, BETZBOTZ. A lot of people miss the part where the second sound is a Z. But yeah, that's what you'll search for on the internet as well as Instagram. We've also got a Facebook page. I have some presence on the Midwest Robot Combat Association Discord server, but main two things, website, Instagram. That's where the most activity is right now.
Awesome. Well, I hope that people check it out, especially for anybody that is in the Midwest, because we've got to keep this growing and keep events happening.
For sure. It's such a wonderful hobby. I mean, this has taught me so many skills that I use today almost every day, but also it's opened the door up for so many things. Combat robots is why I learned SolidWorks. SolidWorks is what gave me an engineering internship I had for a little over a year, which if I didn't end up hating working in an office, probably could have turned into a full-time career, right? So there's all these little things that you learn along the way, which can be applied to so many other things. And I would recommend to just about anyone, go to an event, if nothing else, if you have even a little bit of interest in watching robots destroy each other. I think there's a little bit of something for, not going to say everyone, but most people.
Yeah, I would say most people. Well, that's great. Everybody, make sure that you follow what Botz is doing. And as far as this show goes, make sure that you like, subscribe, follow, comment, all of that good stuff. I think as of right now, we're like 149 away from hitting 1,000 subscribers. So let's get there. Let's make it a goal. It takes just a little click, and if you decide you don't like it 6 months from now, that's fine. You can just unsubscribe. but you won't, because it's great. So well, thank you everyone for watching, and we'll see everybody next time on the show.